there's no music if you have no body to play it with. So take care of your body first.
You getting into the gym and you lifting weights and working on muscles it's physical therapy for the benefit of your playing.
The truth is, nothing works like just taking care of the simple stuff: diet, exercise, and sleep. Take care of that and you'll be fine.
Hey, welcome back to the Tuned and Strong podcast. This is Angela McCuiston of Music Strong.
And this is Dr. Jen Cabas-May of Tuned and Toned Performance.
And we got it right for once. And we are joined today by a friend and colleague of mine, Brian Corbin, owner of, it is Corbin Clarinet Products, right?
You got it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be a little bit more on the business side of our podcast topics. So, Brian, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, like what you do, how you got there?
Oh, how much time do you have? So
all the time in the world.
I'll give you the summary and you can poke a little bit if you like. So, of course, my name is Brian Corbin. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me here, Jen. We go way back. And so, my name is Brian Corbin. I own Corbin Clarinet Products, officially be Corbin Clarinet Products, and we live in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I'm married to my wife Lily, who is also a clarinet player. We're both clarinet players. She plays in the Navy band here in Pearl Harbor, but I'm just the sort of ultimate clarinet, if you will. And I do a lot of clarinet business stuff. So I make and manufacture clarinet barrels and different accessories, and we distribute clarinets for Royal Global and some other brands. And we just build a network of people that love clarinet and just a bunch of clarinet related stuff. So that's kind of my business. Before we moved to Hawaii, I did a lot of performing and teaching, but that's not really, unfortunately, the community that Hawaii has here. So there's not nearly as much opportunity for me to perform. And so I've scaled that back pretty much to almost zero for now, which is sort of sad, but it doesn't have to be. And teaching is now mostly virtual. So I do a lot more traveling now that things are kind of opening back up. We just returned from Texas last week, the big Texas Music Educators Association conference. So just a big clarinet nerd. Got a couple of degrees from Indiana University and Florida State University, which is actually where I met Jen there at FSU in Tallahassee.
We're all FSU grads.
There's the Knoll connection. So that's a little bit about me.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was like, Angela's got a question. Okay, let's go with that. My thought was, so you obviously when we met, you were doing repair, but my impression was that it was mostly on the side. It was a lot of performing and teaching, like you were saying. So what kind of brought, and I say repair because that's in my head how you got from where you were to where you are, is started with repair. How did that transition look for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll just go to the beginning where the repair started, because, having, listened to some of your podcasts and seeing the variety of topics that you're talking about, not just, fitness specific or performance specific, but about business and all of that. I think it's important for people to realize how many aspects of our business can be utilized for your career, right? So when I was an undergraduate, music education, I wanted to be the world's next greatest band director in the world. I mean, I was that kid, right? Grew up in the public school band, and that was like, oh my gosh, it changed my life, right? So I wanted to be a band director. I was at Indiana University. I was doing music ed. But part of that process is you're going out to schools and you're kind of observing other teachers and you're working with these students. And one of the major issues that I found when I was going into the schools was just the functionality of the students' instruments. So I was having a teacher who was asking me to lead clarinet sectionals. And most of that time was spent diagnosing and sort of repairing, in air quotes, because I was just doing sort of what I thought I needed to do to get those instruments to be functional. And kind of a memory struck with me because I remember being in sixth or seventh grade band. I think it was sixth grade band. And, I was starting on old plastic Bundy, was in disrepair, not good shape, and it wasn't working. And my teacher, when we weren't able to play, just finger on a pencil. And I remember feeling sort of left out a little bit, right? And that teacher, by the way, was one of my favorite teachers. So nothing against the teacher, but trying to get me to cooperate, to participate in the class, even though I couldn't play. Well, I didn't ever want that really to be something that, held back one of my future students. So I remember being a sophomore at IU and thinking, I have to learn at least some basic repair skills, because whether it's financial reasons or time, I'm going to be in a position where I need to fix my students' instruments. So for Christmas one year, I asked for a Music Medic repair kit. At the time, they were like, I don't know, $90, $100 or something. And that's really where it all started. I was a sophomore at IU. I got this kit. I started buying like $30, $40 clarinets on eBay. Eventually, I would pretty much destroy my own plastic clarinet in the process. And I just learned how to do basic things, how to change a cork, how to test for leaks, how to change a pad. Very, very simple things that eventually would lead me into my later time at IU doing things as big as a full repad. That's like a big deal to me. For someone who started with no formal training, has never received any formal training on repair for that matter, and just learned through YouTube videos, every book that was available, watching other repair techs at a local music store that I taught at. That's where it was. So Jen, when you met me, I just, got to FSU, and I was just dangerous enough with repair that teachers could send me students, right? And I could at least say, oh yeah, I can do that without messing up, right? Because I never did anything that I wouldn't first do on my own horn. That was sort of the principle I lived by. I would never take money from anybody for any repair that I wasn't first going to be able to do on my own horn, and haven't, that I was going to have success because I've done it multiple times. I felt confident. That's something, by the way, that's really important when you do things. I know a lot of people who say, just say yes and figure it out later. I don't ascribe to that in all aspects of my life when you're dealing with people's livelihoods. Mm-hmm. So that's where I was when I got to FSU, and I was quickly the guy that people would send to do just basic stuff, right? So if somebody split their clarinet in half, that's a different story. But leaking things, keys, stuff like that, right? I got better and better the more I did it, the more I watched and learned. And so it was actually that first year at FSU where I thought, hey, I'm learning so much about repair. I'm learning about things like acoustics. When I raise this vent pad up, that changes the clarity and the intonation and resonance of a note. When I add material to this tone hole, that lowers the pitch. Different things I discovered. I was learning just sort of second nature. And I said, hey, wait a second, I've got this R13 clarinet, right? A very popular model clarinet for those non-clarinet players. And they all kind of suffer from the same sort of issues because, the clarinet, like most instruments, are imperfect. You have to compromise things. And that led me into reading more about acoustics and the barrel making. And I took some wood turning lessons while I was in Tallahassee, actually, to learn as much as I could about wood. Now, this guy had no musical background. He didn't know anything about what I was doing, but I didn't care because I wanted to learn things from somebody who wasn't in my industry who could teach me those basics. I took all that knowledge and I took it to one of my, who's now a friend and colleague of mine, a manufacturer, and I started designing things and giving him these designs and saying, hey, I want to do this and that. The numbers tell me that if I do this, this is going to change this or that. I need your manufacturing skills to take my designs and bring them to life, right? Here's a model that I made on a wood lathe. It took me 3 hours to make this one barrel, but that's not survivable. So can you do that in a larger scale? And that's where it started. And then once you get in the industry, you meet people, you learn from other people, you expand your horizons. All this time, I was also learning about mouthpieces. I was interacting with other people. I was finding out that there were other manufacturers in the world that Americans really had no idea about because marketing sort of dominates. And I linked up with the guy who I now work very intimately with, Yuan Gao, with Royal Global Instruments. And this guy is just amazing. He owns his own factory. He built it up, himself before he was working with others. And now he has 100% control. And so that's where my business sort of started, and where I am today is traveling all around the country, showing people my products and the Royal products, and showing them that really high quality stuff can be made at a reasonable price. And we're now sharing, what I think is the really cool part of this is we're sharing these musical gifts with people who before couldn't necessarily participate because maybe they were financially out of the game. So, hey, you can buy a set of B flat and A set of clarinets that are really, really good for the same price as one premium clarinet from another manufacturer. Not that those aren't amazing clarinets. They're really great clarinets. It's just that it's the difference between, this is not a great analogy, but my first car was a Corolla. Well, guess what? That Corolla got me from where I needed to go, point A to point B. Maybe I would like a Ferrari or a Porsche, but I'm going to spend more money on those. It's probably going to have more issues, to be honest. And the goals are accomplished. I just look a little cooler getting there from one place to the other.
Facts.
So that's kind of where I am now. And I went from repair all the while. By the way, I should mention this. My teachers were very supportive of what I was doing, even when maybe sometimes I knew that they wanted me to practice a little more or do this or that. They understood that my career path was going to be look different than everyone else's, as most people's do. And they understood that I was going to take control of that. And that's where, for me, I look back, I think, wow, I had some really amazing teachers, because not many teachers would have put up with the things that I wanted to do. But I think it worked out for all of us.
Yeah. I did not realize that you're not. Well, okay, so this is kind of a multi-tiered thing, and Angela, if you've got something else, like, feel free to dive in here. But I'm going to say I didn't realize that you didn't have formal training in repair. But at the same time, for people who don't know, I do actually have a little bit of background in repair. Not like Brian. Like, don't ask me to do a repad. I can, but unless you really, really don't care about what happens to the instrument, I wouldn't. But same sort of thing where my training came from a mix of experimenting, because you're on a gig and like, okay, well, this pad is leaking, fix it right now so you can, get your money. And I lucked into kind of an apprenticeship position temporarily. It was a half-time job for one of the local shops, and they just taught me on the job. But I didn't realize that your training was informal, except that thinking about that, I think there's a couple of repair schools.
I was just about to ask. I mean,
but
what repair schools are there? Like, this is not something that's talked about. It's just
No.
that is like the biggest question. Where do I send my flute? Where do I send my instrument?
Yeah.
And everybody goes, I mean,
or I know a guy.
or I know a guy. Yeah, I know a guy. But it's like, and then we're not taught how to repair our own instruments. It's a weird situation to be in. I don't get it at all.
Yeah.
So like, where do you go to learn?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question, actually. And you're hitting on something that I want to change a little bit. So first off, there are repair schools, right? There are places like Red Wing, Minnesota, and a couple of others. That there is a national organization that professional repair technicians are a part of, that do sponsored classes. But I don't want to say but, because that's a very it's an infrastructure that's been around a long time, and most repair techs in most music stores are familiar with either these schools or they've been there. So there's pros and cons. The pros of those schools are that for relatively little investment, it's still education, but for relatively little investment compared to the six-figure cost of a lot of our education, you can learn how to basically be very employable by many stores to fix instruments, whether it's band instruments or string instruments or whatever, but usually you become sort of the jack of all trades technician. And what that means doesn't necessarily mean your quality of your work is low, but what it does mean is that you're not probably going to be focusing on one type of thing at a time, which means you may not have either the resources or time or ability to sort of do what we consider like artist level repairs. And so there are schools out there, there's only a few, and typically most people don't know about them, and it may not be marketed as an incredibly attractive career. So that's the other thing. Because remember, a lot of people who do what we do so because of what it looks like to us from the outside, regardless of what it actually is, to us internally. So there are some schools. But the other thing to remember is that there was a time, and maybe that's coming back, we'll see, but there was a time where most of the best technicians were able to do so with an apprenticeship. Okay, so they were working one-on-one with someone. There are a lot of famous clarinet technicians that come out of places like Philadelphia, and a lot of history behind that you can read about. But traditionally, that was a job where you were an apprentice. You made some money, but obviously you weren't making what the people who were teaching you were making. But it was a relationship that went both ways. They were getting some help. They were teaching you, and they were also getting some help, and you were getting an education and sort of a living at the same time. And then eventually they understood you'd go out and do your own thing, unless they gave you an attractive offer. That's how it worked. Well, there's a period in time where, and this isn't just exclusive to this world, it becomes a very competitive market, where it's no longer necessarily viable to teach someone how to do what you're doing or to give them all of your knowledge without understanding that they're going to eventually take your market share a little bit. So you have to think about that. I know it's hard for us to say, well, that's a crazy shift, but that is a part of the world today where people are a little bit scared to share their knowledge in fear of what that could do for their living. And I have to be honest, that is a very reasonable thing to consider. If you're not going to have someone pay you for your education what you think it's valued. So you're right. Most of us say, I've got a guy, or here's my technician. She's really great at oboes, or that. But if you take a look now, most of the repair techs that are really, really superb at what they do that we know of have been either doing it for a long time. B, they had that one-on-one apprenticeship, so they're really, really good. C, maybe they are clarinet players, and so they're working on clarinets. That's where I am. I didn't have formal training, but where I had a leg up is I know what a clarinet's supposed to feel like. I know what a clarinet, I know the possibilities. And even though no one told me what that should do, I knew because as a player who, played at a high level, a lot of education, I understood that. So, a lot of the best oboe repair technicians, they're oboe players or former oboe players, right? So that's a really key part of our role. But what I want to change actually is what you said, Angela. We don't get taught this type of stuff in school. We don't get taught a lot of things in school, let me just say, that we should. And I think it should be a mandatory class in every single music education and music performance degree that you should take at least a semester of basic repair techniques. And I actually think it should be exclusive in part to your instrument, right? So maybe if it's music education, you are required to learn some basics on multiple instruments, but one semester is not a lot of time. But especially if you're performance, it should be, can you take apart and put your instrument back together and it still works at the end of it? Most people would say no, they can't. And for me, as somebody who wants independence, flexibility, that's really scary to say, hey, yeah, I'll do this gig. And then you show up to the gig, something's not working. What are you going to do?
What do you do?
Yeah, at least basics of rigging an instrument, tackling an emergency repair of a leaky pad or a busted spring, or, rubber bands, hair ties, and
fell out. I mean, little things.
Right. Rubber bands, hair ties, sticky pads, and Teflon tape.
Teflon tape, huge one.
Yeah, like I can do most of what I need with those things in a pinch.
Right. Yep.
But
Some chewing gum,
yeah. But yeah, at least you want your people to be able to rig their stuff for a gig. Like maybe not the more advanced stuff, or even like recorking is still scary to me. Again, I can do that, but recorking is scary to me. I'm always afraid that I'm going to shave off some of the tendons. But at least rigging it,
I mean, like I was having this conversation with a couple of students yesterday. One of my students looked at me and she goes, "My flute is clicking. Why is it clicking?" "Well, get it here." And I looked like, well, the low B key, one of the on the little feet, the cork had fallen out. I'm like, cork is off. She goes, "What do I do?" I'm like, "How often use that key right now? Like 0? Don't worry about it." But in the meantime, we're like, and I'm racking my brains like, well, she's got like a $12,000 flute. I'm not touching it, and that's the thing. It's like,
yeah,
you've got this. Then again, I could probably fix it. But do I have the tools? Have I ever done it? No. Where do I go get cork that's only this tiny? It's like we're not given those skills. And in fact, we were talking about screwdrivers. And somebody said, "Why would I have a screwdriver? Actually, who has screwdrivers?" And I went, "I got 2 sets. Like I got this nifty little set in high school, and I like with the one that it moves at the top. Like I use these suckers all the time. I'm like somebody's D sharp roller keys always falling off, or the screws always coming out. And those are little things you can do at least a little bit, right? And I got this in high school, and I remember thinking, "Whoa, look at me! I have screwdrivers. I can do things." Like I didn't know what I was doing. But like then you just kind of pick stuff up and like, why was that not taught as basics and lessons instead of when something happens, you better know who to ask and freak out.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's another side of this, by the way, which is a lot of times these repairs that crop up are because, students, or not just students, but performers' instruments weren't set up to begin with in the first place, or they didn't have the regular maintenance. So what's hard to tell people is sort of like, look, wouldn't you get your oil change on your car at regular intervals so that you can protect your investment? Although I wouldn't call that an investment, but you get the point. A musical instrument is the same thing. You got to get your regular oil changes. You have to get your regular maintenance, because you're going to end up paying more later, not only in financial resources, but potentially in time, because it may be worse, and then you're out of commission for a while. So one of the things we do, and why I work so closely with this particular manufacturer, is that we want the instruments when they're new to arrive to you. Yes, always most instruments need some setup, but we want them to come to you in a position where you don't need to do any major mechanical things for years to come, other than the standard stuff that's going to happen over time, right? So that's another part of the industry that we don't educate. Oh yeah, go to your local music store and go buy this Gemeinhardt flute or whatever. That's like as much flute stuff as I know. Go buy this instrument, and the music store sells you an instrument as it came straight from the factory, right? Ooh, that's a little scary. And that's part of what we're changing now. So you may even see these little sort of boutique shops, which, by the way, I love, are starting to crop up more and more amongst all the instruments, right? I work with several of these dealers who all they do are clarinets, or maybe saxophones or flutes or whatever. And they specialize in, this is how an instrument should arrive to you from brand new. Don't get me wrong, I actually think it's important that we support our local music stores as well. So it would be great if we can educate these local businesses that have been around for a while to support your local economy. That being said, as musicians, our time is our money. That's just the way it is, right? People I don't think they often think about all that practice time you're putting in. That's money, right? That's actual money. Other people, they go to work 9 to 5, they come home, they're done with work. They go back to work, they still get their check. We might put in 30 hours of practice for something and get paid, $1,000, and for 30 hours, that's nothing, right? So don't let these other things affect your business in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen that too when students are trying out instruments. They're like, "Well, I like this one because it feels better," and I'm like, "Okay." The other
It's
one,
ceiling.
just like the straight open G sounds better on this other one that you're really okay. Let me test it. Let like hand it over, swap mouthpieces, whatever. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's because this is not set up at all. This is atrocious, and I don't know who touched it, but it came out of the factory leaking." Yeah, you know, like yeah, it's not adjusted. You can't play a long B because it's out of alignment and just well, there must be something wrong with the instrument because I'm blowing as hard as I can. No, kiddo. Well, I mean, no, it's that they thought there was something wrong with
Nothing wrong with
them.
them.
Sorry, my
Right.
bad. Yeah.
No, it's your instrument,
No, it's
not
the
you.
instrument. And it's not even the instrument per se in that way. It's how it's not adjusted.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? You hit another great point that, I mean, I was going to say a lot of people will immediately blame the manufacturer. And to some degree, yes, right? It is the manufacturer in terms of the result coming from the factory. But I mean, I'll be at a conference or something and people will say, they'll blame insert name of manufacturer here uh, because this instrument, oh, this is just a terrible instrument. Well, first off, you can never make a judgment about a particular model of instrument by playing only one. That's the
Right.
first thing, right?
Yep.
The second thing is it's not fair for you to immediately blame someone who's not right there with you, making sure the instrument is exactly in the shape it was sort of destined to be for its optimal performance, right? So we get this all the time. Like I distribute Royal Global clarinets, but I play multiple brands, right? My bass clarinet is a Buffet Tosca. We have Selmers and Yamahas here. Of course, we sell Royal Global. So I'm not sort of this like brand elitist like a lot of people are, unfortunately. But I do know that every single one of these manufacturers makes really high quality instruments. But if they're not set up, they're not going to play well, right? And so that's a really, really important education tool that we're missing. And I see even, it's so sad to see, but even teachers with doctorates and a lot of education and really qualified performers who have little to no and in some ways harmful information that they're passing on to their students about particular makes and models of instruments. And so sometimes I'll see this. I won't go too deep into it, but sometimes it's because teachers may have a financial incentive to either tell you to buy a certain instrument or maybe send you to their repair guy. I'm not saying that's common. I'm just saying I've seen that. Sometimes it's simply because look, they're teaching and performing. They don't have time to sit there and fix your instrument or worry about that. That's a part of your education you're expected to take control over, but they should be informed of how to take you to those next steps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know in the flute world, you're talking about brand elitists. It's nothing but. I mean, it's like, you play a what? Oh, well, I play a, it's like everybody's got their own preference. I mean, I know I certainly have mine, and it's just like, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's kind of funny when he's mentioned like being have a little bit of financial incentive. I kind of like the idea of teachers having that a little bit, because they might be able to get their hands on some things that their students wouldn't be able to get them to try it. But at the same time, if you're only doing that at the expense of not being able to try other things, not so much.
Right.
But I do know, like in the flute world, we have like sponsored, I'm a Yamaha artist or a Miyazawa artist or so-and-so artist. I mean, it is everywhere.
Yeah. No, and you make a good point, but there's a couple of sides to that coin, right? So of course I know teachers who, because they need to make a living too. I mean, let's not act like most college gigs are these really well-paying jobs, right? There are very few of them, and there's two sides of the coin. One side is that, for me to remember, Angela, you made a great point. There's this elitism in our industry. But actually, the elitism is only a very small part of our industry. What people don't realize is when we talk about clarinets or any other instrument, guess what? Most people that are buying these instruments are not professional musicians, right? There are more student plastic clarinets sold than any wooden clarinet by far, hands down. Why? Because you got a school band, right, that needs to supply 30 clarinets. And so guess what? They're not selling 30 professional clarinets. They're getting these plastic clarinets or whatever that can stand up to a lot. So we have to remember that most people who buy musical instruments are not in the professional world like we are. It just happens to be that the marketing kind of looks like that, right?
Mhm.
The other thing is, yes, I do find that teachers, look, they have to make income, they have to make a living, and maybe they're not paid that great from whatever job they have. And so some of the ways they do that is by building up their reputation, which maybe that means aligning yourself with a professional company now whose instruments you play and you love, and they're going to support you in some way. Nothing wrong with that at all. I'm all for that, actually. But I do have a little bit of a problem with teachers getting direct compensation for selling instruments to their students, because typically what ends up happening is then the students, despite what you think might be a benefit, they end up not getting access to multiple brands. They're often sort of streamlined into this. In fact, I was just at this conference talking to somebody who had just joined, the professor had just joined the artist roster of some company. And then guess what? All their students are asked to buy this particular model and brand of instrument. And not beside the fact that I thought, that's a little bit, for some kids who are on scholarship, especially, or spending $5,000 or $10,000 on an instrument can be a lot of money. But the other side of it is they do get a cut of that. And, I think it's one thing to give a teacher a credit, or here's a mouthpiece, or here's a barrel, or here's a discount on your, or something like that. But it's another to say, okay, you're responsible for educating the next generation of musicians and educators, but I'm not going to, give you access or give you the ability to shop around and find out what's best for you, because guess what? Your voice may not be my voice. And while I do think that manufacturers make a variety of instruments for that reason, so you can usually find something you like within each manufacturer, there are sort of differences amongst all. So some manufacturers of clarinets may make clarinets with thicker sidewalls, whereas some may make them with thinner sidewalls. The thinner sidewalls overall is going to give you more resonance and ring, and maybe upper partials and better response. The thicker sidewalls may give you a deeper and darker sound, maybe a little more resistant, and maybe you like one or the other. But we're not educating people on those types of characteristics, mainly because the manufacturers don't necessarily want people talking about these types of things. So that's one thing. But the other is the teachers simply don't know, and they also don't know how to translate that. And that's something that I've learned sort of being on the ground, that there's a lot of marketing you have to wade through to get to really the heart of the matter, which is getting people the instruments that are going to be used as a tool for their voice, right? I could play any brand of clarinet, and at the end of the day, I guarantee you I'm going to sound like myself, at the end of the day. It's just which tool makes that a little bit easier for me. I may have to work harder on one and less hard on the other, but I could sound like myself because most music comes from here, right? And here to some degree, if you believe in that, and other things.
Yeah. And if you're audio only, he pointed to his ears, embouchure and heart.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep an eye out for this stuff as we're producing more audio only stuff. So.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was the same thing when I was working in the shop that I was working in. I mean, I told you I'm working on plastic clarinets. They're usually the junker used ones. It's what you learn on. So if I destroyed something, it wasn't the end of the world. But I mean, I think at the time Ryan would come meet me for lunch some days, and he would know pulling in whether or not it was me or one of the other two guys working on clarinets who was testing the instrument. He knew. He's like, yeah, well, that sounded like you and that one didn't. Like on a crappy piece of plastic versus, my professional model. Yeah. So, and I feel fortunate. I've heard through the grapevine of the ones who like, no, I'm a this artist, so therefore, if you're going to join my studio, you must have this instrument. I was very fortunate, though. I feel like that even though I studied under sponsored clarinetists, brand sponsored clarinetists, we always had a couple people who were on other brands, and it was never an issue as long as they sounded fine and weren't experiencing technical problems, you know. And they sounded like they belonged in the studio. It wasn't anything bizarre.
You know, I feel probably kind of blessed that I was never in a studio where you were expected to play a certain thing ever.
Yeah.
You were just expected to make sure that you invest in what was right for your sound and your budget. I mean, everybody celebrated when you got a new flute. We didn't care what it was, but we wanted to hear how excited you were and how did you sound and show us all about it and why you liked it. And, you know, I mean, like seeing that and seeing the process, I mean, we would go to like the Florida Flute Fair and NFA and all these things. And the whole studio would be like, oh, let's listen to so-and-so try these different instruments. But it wasn't a brand thing, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So like the last few years of when I was teaching private lessons to high schoolers and middle schoolers, I set up a relationship with a company. They also do repairs, but they do repairs and they sell instruments. And I said, hey, you know, can you send me, I would put out to the studio because I'd have, you know, the kids need step up instruments. There was nothing around here. And they're like, what do I need? And they've, you know, and it's like, it's not that simple that I just give you a brand. There's no, and I finally said, send me. And I think at one point there were like 15, 20 flutes that they sent me, all different budgets, different styles, different metals, different brands. And I would lay them all out and the kids got to try them. And of course I kind of guided them to what I thought was the best, but they could try anything they wanted, from like a $15,000 flute to an $800 flute. They could try it all. And then their parents got to hear, and then they got to trial it. And then, you know, and just having them be able to try the different instruments and see what they feel like, because they all do feel a little different, was really eye-opening, because they're like, well, mom said I need a step up instrument. Which one do I get? I'm like, it's not that simple.
Right.
And then I got I got a commission, which was nice, but I let them.
Yeah, no, and that's different than what we're talking about, right? I mean, it's different when, you know, you're still giving them the opportunity. And the irony is, you know, I play, you know, going through school, right? I remember my first professional clarinet, you know, everyone said, hey, get a Buffet R13. And I'm glad I did, because that got me to where I was, right? And where I am today. But the irony of all of that is that once I got past high school, actually, one of my teachers played Buffet and LeBlanc. You know, the other played in the President's Own, and you know, she was playing on Buffet, very common in the band at the time. But when I went to my first school, you know, IU as an undergraduate, none of the three teachers there played Buffet, right? Two of them played Rossi, one of them played Selmer, but they never told us you got to go buy Selmer or you got to go buy a Rossi, and still most people played Buffet because that was what was kind of the standard, and they make great instruments. And so then I went to Florida State, and guess what? None of those teachers played Buffet. I mean, at some point, everybody has played Buffet, right? So they played them at some point, but they were artists for different companies, and never once was I told I needed to buy a clarinet from their company. In fact, even they still all kind of said, well, at least we know that, you know, if you get an R13 or if you get a Buffet, we at least know it's common and people know how to work on them. And so despite none of them actually playing this one brand, I was still open to, you know, they were still suggesting maybe you go with the thing that people know. So on one hand, especially as young students, right, it's up to us to know the quality. You know, it's you gotta, if you're gonna recommend something, you want to know that it's good and it will hold up. So in that aspect, I totally understand teachers saying, look, go get this Yamaha, whatever, go get this or that, because at least I know that there's a brand and a warranty behind it and it's going to hold up, and this is a really popular instrument, right? Or you know, later down the road, people will say, well, look, if you're really, really serious, and I don't love this, but if you're really, really serious and you want to get this job and this ensemble, well, guess what? If you don't play this instrument, they may not like you. And I don't love that because I think that's overblown a little bit. But that's a little bit different than when we talk about the masses, right?
Yeah.
Or people who there has to all be one brand. I mean, Lily, my wife, she plays Royal Global clarinets, and she's an artist for them. And they were really the first clarinets that she played that it like felt like home to her. But guess what? Royal doesn't make an E-flat clarinet right now, and so her E-flat clarinet is a buffet. Guess what? I play Royal clarinets, but my bass clarinet is a Tosca bass clarinet, which I absolutely love. And I have no plans on getting rid of that bass anytime soon, just because there's another bass that I have a business relationship with. That's not something I find is very helpful for me, because I'm going to play what's best for me, what I've already invested in. And I also don't find it helpful for others to try to convince people that what I'm doing is the right way, because maybe you don't want to sound like me, or maybe you have different, physiological structure, which, you guys understand better than a lot of other people, that is going to make one thing easier for you than another.
Yeah,
For sure.
I think this is probably a good time to take a quick break before we start down another path. But I do have a couple other topics when we come back.
Be right back. Hey musicians, did you know that up to 90% of musicians will experience playing related pain or injury over the course of their career? How many hushed conversations have you heard about a lingering, quote, shoulder pain, or a weird tingling in your fingers, or maybe low back pain, or a crampy weakness, or maybe you or your colleague just says, I just have to get through the gig, and you watch them pop Advil like candy, maybe flush it down with whiskey. How many times have we seen something like this? So many, right? Well, it's time we start talking about our struggles, our pain, our frustrations in a private space where we don't just complain and mobilize and blindly stretch, but we learn how to strengthen our muscles, our career successes, and build each other up. I've got a brand new program that combines all of these things, and I want you to be a part of it. It's a community, not a workout. It's a community with group coaching and great content that in 12 weeks will have you understanding more about your body, what you need, and how you work so you can avoid that career-threatening injury. The 3 things that musicians don't want. We don't want to be injured. We don't want to have a lack of stamina. And we don't want to be clueless. AKA, when you hurt, who do you go see? Just a, quote, doctor? Well, this program addresses all of those things. You're going to walk away with an immense knowledge of who to see. You're going to be empowered because you're going to know what to do should you ever get injured, or should you have a colleague that gets injured. You will be able to actually offer appropriate advice. You're also going to learn about the body and the anatomy as it relates to playing your instrument and your own anatomy. And then you're going to learn how to build not just your strength and endurance, but you're going to learn how to design your own corrective exercise program. So I hope you will join me in this new program. It's called the Music Strong Pilot Program, Job Security for Musicians. Hey guys, welcome back. Jinx.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Tuned and Strong podcast. Sorry, I wasn't sure which one of us was going, so I was like, I'll do it. Let's go. Okay, so we are talking again with Brian Corbin of Corbin Clarinet Products. I think I got it right that time. Cool. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, we talked about kind of where you came from, the repair business as it is, how that translates into teaching and equipment. But way back at the beginning, you had mentioned, you intended to be a band director, and then you had been doing a lot of performing, and that's kind of come to a stop because of your location, and I'm sure too just kind of the times, things still not being up and running in full, and how you're now doing this full time, right? The
That's right.
stuff. Yeah. So we've talked in previous podcasts, multiple ones of them. I know we talked about it with Garrett Hope and Heidi Kabagay, and we had one on imposter syndrome. I think we talked about with Brian Witkowski too.
Yeah.
So multiple episodes we've talked about that sort of tough emotional ride of transitioning, if you will, in air quotes, from your original goals to like this elite performance type thing, and then okay, well, we're going to go in a completely different direction, and that issue of like, well, am I giving up? Am I betraying myself? You know, imposter syndrome kicks in, all sorts of stuff. But since it seems like you're on pretty much the other side of this, or most of the way on the other side of this at this point, maybe you could just kind of talk about what you went through and how you got to the other side.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll say that yeah, I'm on the other side, but I'm always looking to improve and evolve, right? As all of us are, and so I'm on the other side of that mostly from two aspects. One, you know, yes, I have a lot more financial stability for sure now than I did when I was in college and before. But the other side of it is sort of a mental switch you have to make. And I'll tell you that I want to be clear. I mean, my music education degree is still very valid. My master's in performance is still very valid, right? I have absolutely no doors closed in terms of potentially, if the time is right in my life, going back to teaching or, you know, opening those doors to playing again. So it's almost not even a transition away, but more of you know, a transition into more doors, more opportunities being open. And so I'll say this: I talk to a lot of people who wouldn't admit this publicly, but they do feel like they're a failure if they're doing anything for money that's not music related. And I have to say, you know, initially I felt this, you know, when we talk about imposter syndrome and those other episodes you mentioned, you know, I suffer from that even to this day, partly because of what we discussed about I don't have any formal training in repair. You know, I don't feel like I have any validity. A lot of people that are doing what I'm doing are much older. I just turned 30, you know, a couple of months ago. And while that's still young, I think, you know, it's certainly, you know, compared to our industry, it's viewed as very young. But for other 30-year-olds, we sort of feel like, oh my gosh, like what are we doing with our lives at 30 and 35 and 40, right? So I actually think that the biggest struggle that I had to overcome, that a lot of people do as well, is what other people see you as, like how they view you. And I had to get over that. Like, you know what? I wasn't doing music to make other people happy. You know, a lot of people do. Like their goal, like they are musicians because they love how other people interact with them. That's okay. But I actually did it for a much more selfish reason. And that was because it made me happy, right? So the reason I wanted to become a teacher is because it made me happy to grow students and young musicians. Of course, I did it for them, but I wouldn't have done it if I didn't like doing it. The reason I performed, yes, is because I wanted the audience to enjoy it, but it was actually because I got enjoyment from them enjoying it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So,
Oh yeah.
For me, I had to accept that I cared more about my happiness than I cared about other people's happiness. And that's a very selfish thing to say, and that's okay. I really believe that's okay. So the transition for me was more of, what can I do in a world that's becoming harder and harder to get one of those elite jobs? What can I do to make sure that I'm financially stable and I always have at least that one thing that kept me happy? And throughout all of this, there's always been one constant, and that was the clarinet. So through teaching my music ed, it was the clarinet, right? Performing, obviously, it's the clarinet. And repair, it's the clarinet. I'm selling clarinets, it's clarinet, right? So that for me was the thing that always had to be in my life. And you know, I know people who today, because of the pandemic and other things, they're making money. Most of their income comes from non-music things. And I actually find that, and I'm sorry to say this, I actually find that a lot more, I choose my words carefully here. Let me just say, I'm impressed by those people, is how I should say it. Because it takes a lot for us to admit to ourselves that this path, this dream that you had now looks different. But I don't know about you guys, you know, I know some people do, but I rarely have the exact same dream, you know, at night when I wake up. If I usually have different dreams, and those dreams, if they are the same theme, it's something's different about it. And just like your dreams when you're asleep, in real life, your dreams evolve and they should change with the times. I'm married now. I have a wife who performs for a living. So I kind of get the performance itch from her a little bit. So, you know, for me, it's about this. don't care as much about what other people think. Care about what makes you happy and what will make you survive and hold on to the thing that you love, because life is unfortunately too short, and it's not promised to us. And if we sit around and by the way, I'm admitting this to myself as we speak, so I'm having a little bit of a moment for myself.
Yeah.
But as we sit around and we wait to do something because of what other people view us as, then unfortunately you're not really living your life. So part of this goes back to the education. Are we teaching students that, hey, yes, you're getting a degree in performance or education or whatever the case is, but you need to be getting a degree in life. And sometimes things change, and you have to adapt with the times. And I feel really, really strongly about that, because it's hard for me to go to these conferences and feel like I'm an equal to these people who've been in the industry for many, many years, or have these trainings or this or that. It's really hard. But, sometimes, Lily will say to me, Brian, but look at how happy those people that worked with you are. Look what you've done. That should be enough for you. And you know what? It is now. It is enough for me to say that what I'm doing has not only a positive impact on others, but because of that, it has a positive impact on me. And am I doing the thing that at one point I thought I could never not do, which was performing for a living? No, I'm not doing that anymore. I miss it. I'm not closing that door, but my life now looks different than it will in 5 years, and it looks different now than it will in 10 years. And I'm going to keep all of those doors open.
Well said.
Yeah.
Said. And it's nice to hear that. I know that you're probably not the only person who has felt like, oh, am I really, because we have all these career paths and we're taught like, nope, there are two ways that you can be a legit musician. It is these two things.
Mm-hmm.
Why? No, there are all these valid things, and the world needs all of us as musicians to do all of them. And they're all valid, and they're all legit. They're all needed.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. And I'll also add that, for me, going back to that point, remember that most of us are in a very small circle in a much larger geometric shape, whatever that shape is, right? So we have to remember that we spend a lot of time in school. Like if I go to a clarinet recital, I'm almost taught to sit there at that recital, and while you're sitting there, you should also be critiquing them internally, so that later on you can help them out and say in a masterclass, well, yeah, great performance. I loved your phrasing, but this or that or this or that. And you know what? I got to be 100% honest with you. That's a great tool to learn and to grow as musicians and all of that stuff. But there came a point where I just wanted to sit down and get out of that mindset. Like I wanted to go to a recital and just enjoy the recital and not feel like as a clarinet player, I have to come out with something to critique them on or whatever that case is. And now I feel that way. Now when I'm working with people, I'm no longer saying, I'm no longer making opinions and this or that. I'm saying, well, hey, let me know what you want. Let me know what you like. Let's figure out how to get to your end goal, and we'll work towards that, understanding that it's always a work in progress. Because, for me, I remember those recitals. Even I'm still in contact with some of these people who, after I performed a recital, they weren't students, they were community members. Those were the people that were most excited about that performance.
Yeah.
That would come up to me afterwards, right? The person who played clarinet in high school
Yeah.
or middle school, right? And they weren't critiquing me on my tone or my phrasing or my dynamic contrast or my staccato. They were just like, man, when you played that, I remembered this, or I felt like that. And man, that's huge. So we have to remember that there's a world outside of the world we're a part of. And I really do believe that if I were to stay in that bubble for too long, I would unfortunately I would go backwards in my mindset rather than expand.
Yeah. I got nothing to say to that.
I got nothing. I'm
Like, no, that's
you hit the nail on the head with that one. I mean, it's so easy for us to get in that bubble, but you're right. Like I can think of several different concerts that I've gotten to play where an audience member came up and went, man, I played flute in middle school, and then we just go on this whole thing. I'm like, man, if I had $1 for every time someone told me they played a flute in middle school,
Yeah.
but or clarinet, right? But it's
right.
like,
If I had
you
$1
get
for
that.
that, and then they tell me, but they're embarrassed about it.
Oh
yeah.
man. Yeah.
Aw.
See, it's funny because I travel a lot for business, right? And I got this shirt and it says my name and my company. It's the nerdiest thing, B Corbin, and it's got Brian on it. And so or I pay with a business card and it says clarinet on or whatever. And so it's very easy. Oh, I played clarinet in high school. And sometimes my wife and I will joke like, oh yeah, everybody's a musician. They always, but actually that's the coolest part of this is that they have no way to relate to you other than what they know, which is that you're dealing with clarinets and they play clarinet. And those are the conversations I have when I'm traveling with people or sitting next to someone on a plane. And we're from completely different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow this one thing, even if they played for 1 year and quit, that's all it took for us to connect. And now I just build a new friendship, even if it was a temporary one, or a new relation, or I learned something from someone. So let's remember that there's a world outside of our world, and that those connections actually make us all better. I definitely won't get political, but just to say that there are 330 million people in this country, and like our country is run by like 2 political parties, and that actually is effective. That can go through any industry. I mean, it's amazing that, do you really think that there's just this coin and there's one side here and there's one side there and that's it? No, there's so many more sides and there's so many more coins. So let's accept that what builds us up and what makes us stronger is actually the diversity of opinions, and being able to accept that and build upon that.
Right. Don't just ask somebody Coke or Pepsi.
There you go. Yeah.
Root beer, please, thank you.
And then they look at you like, what do you mean root beer?
Right?
Yeah. Oh, you're
What's
one of
that?
those.
And then you make assumptions, right?
Yeah. No, it's good. No,
Yeah.
I think that's really good.
So do you have any programs that you would want to share, like you're coming up with? I mean, you mentioned something about how you wanted to change things in schools. Can you go a little bit more down that train of thought?
Yeah, I mean, very new ideas, because I mean, admittedly, I don't want to make it seem like I have this luxurious, glorious life, right? I mean, I work long hours. I'm in the shop a lot. I'm growing a business where there's no handbook on how to do it, and so I'm learning on the fly in many ways, relying on experience of others. And with that, by the way, also takes its own, I take my fair share of punches from people who are older and wiser, air quotes for those of you who can't see, and tell me how things should or shouldn't be. So I'm still new to things outside of my business, but one of the things that I really am trying to work on with schools, whether I'm involved or not, is for these major music schools to start thinking about programs that will expand their students' marketability outside of music. So in terms of entrepreneurship, maybe that is bringing in a technician for a residency to teach your studio, and you as well as a teacher who may be inexperienced, how to do these basic things so you could pass on that knowledge, right? Or more educational outreach programs that will help people say, hey, look, this, most people will end up getting this degree or that degree if you want to go into music, but that degree doesn't mean you have to do that, right? Remember, most people aren't in the field of their degree. Somehow in music, we feel like we just forget that fact and feel like if you have to do that or you have to get this degree. And I get it, right? Because as a teacher, most states, usually you got to have a college degree, and it'd be better if it was in education, right? That's not really the case with performance. People don't care what degree you have. They just care if you can play or not. But that degree might get you into this or that door. So I'm working on some programs that are mostly not, my name's not really attached to it. It's mostly like on an advisory role, just trying to help people think about things they can do and things that I wish I would have had when I was a student, including, just reaching out to a more diverse group of people. And I'm not just talking about what we usually think about diversity in terms of the way people look or the way or where people come from or religion or that kind of thing. I'm talking, I mean, there's so many more aspects to diversity than what's often, talked about or shown if you watch TV or whatever. So that's really important, because you could be from the exact same place and look the exact same way and think completely different, and you can be completely opposite, and somehow your vision and ideals align, but maybe you're afraid to speak about that in some cases. So still very fresh, still very new. I'm thinking about some things. One thing we're working on right now that I've been talking about for years, but I've internally struggled to do this, is a sort of blog, honestly, about my experiences, what I've seen going from my transition into where I am now, and some of the things I've experienced. But I'll be honest with you, what's kept me back is knowing that I have to be really careful about what I say to not step on other people's toes. And I am still worrying about, I want to tell my story without denigrating others. I want to tell my story without showing that, hey, I didn't have a great experience with this person or this situation or that situation, because I don't want to take away from anyone else. But it's really hard to tell your truth, right, without telling it factually. So I'm struggling with that a little bit, but very, very soon you'll be seeing some things from me that just talk very generally about how my experiences came to be and how maybe others can open up and create their own opportunities.
Yeah. And I think this might be a good transition point too into the work that you're doing with Royal Global, which is something that you and I have talked about externally, but you've touched on in here. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? What they are and what you're developing with them? I think those two are important.
Sure. Yeah. So this really, clarinet players may know this more, but just for the general audience, in most of what we do in terms of music, there's a lot of tradition involved, and a lot of that tradition comes from older thoughts and ideas about what something should or shouldn't be, or a very high standard that a particular company may have reached for a long period of time, right? So for me, I met Royal Global. I met Yuan Gao, who is the owner of Royal Global, some years ago, at a conference when he was working with someone else, and they were doing a little bit different things than he was doing now. But even when I met him then, and he was working with other people, he was in the process of doing something kind of revolutionary. And that is to build your own factory kind of from the ground up and have 100% control over it. So to give people perspective, and again, there's no knock on anybody for this, it's just the way the industry is. All of the big name manufacturers of any instrument, all the ones that have been around for hundreds of years, they may have a workshop in France or Germany or wherever it is where they do most of their stuff. But in order to grow to a certain level, you have to outsource, right? And so just because somebody's name is on it doesn't actually mean that it's made in their particular factory. This is pretty much how all products are made, right? While we should definitely have some reservations about things that are coming from China, just like we should about things that are coming from US and other places, what traditionally these manufacturers have done is outsource work to China for instruments that we want to be affordable, right? So guess what? You may love your professional instrument that's made in France, but if you want your student's instrument to be made in France and still good, they're going to pay a lot more money than they're going to be paying if this company has a factory they trust that they can make it, with cheaper labor, so that now we can get more clarinets into the hands of people. Mm-hmm. So Yuan Gao comes along, and while he's having other people make his design instruments for him, he's in the process of building his own factory. And Yuan Gao, who originally is from China, he's an American citizen, now actually has his own story, which we don't have time to talk about, but it's really cool because he basically came to this country with nothing, was trying to get in for a long time. During that time, it wasn't easy for foreigners to come in, especially from China. He got a call, his visa was approved. He sold all of his belongings, came to Boston, and took lessons with people and was in school. But anyways, what he's doing is unlike anyone else. He has 100% control of his factory. All of the Royal Global instruments are made in this particular factory. which is, I think, very unique. And as a performer, as a world-class performer, if you Google this guy, I mean, his recordings are amazing. He's won international competitions. He has that advantage, just like I have an advantage as a clarinet player working on your clarinet, because now I can say things like, hey man, I noticed that the intonation of this note is a little bit this or that. Maybe we should alter this so that it puts the 12th a little bit higher so that we can have some room to lower that pitch. You know, these types of things that big name manufacturers cannot do because they have to do things on a very large scale, right?
Mhm.
And we don't. I can ask them to make a change, and guess what? In 3 or 4 weeks, the next batch of instruments are better. So our big thing with Royal Global is that, hey, look, you know, you guys don't realize that make clarinets are not, it's not that expensive, even though you're paying, you know, 5 figures, believe it or not, for this clarinet. But there's a lot of other expenses, right? Like marketing and shipping, and, you know, you got to pay people high wages. And what he's doing is saying, hey, we're making really high quality instruments. We're not going to take a huge profit. We're still paying our workers very high wages compared to what others are being paid, but we're going to do this at a level that's so high, it's going to be the best value in the industry. So for me, as someone who had to literally take out loans and paid everything on credit cards for most of my life up until recently, really, I could never afford those clarinets that people were playing on when they were winning auditions. So it means a lot to me to have a manufacturer who's solely concerned about the quality of the instrument and, you know, takes essentially less money than he could because we're more concerned about helping other people. So, you know, I should be frank that if it was up to me, I would have a clarinet store and I would sell every brand because I think that I'd reach more people to it. Unfortunately, in this business, you know, working with as a distributor for Royal Global, working, you know, how I work, it's not really possible for me to do that. But I'm always honest and I tell people, look, just because I work with Royal doesn't mean you shouldn't look at other manufacturers. I just believe that what we're doing has the highest value because of just, you know, everything we're putting into it. And for me, I really think that we are opening up a new market. To be specific, our bass clarinets is like right now, there's 2 things that we just cannot make enough. And part of that's because of our age, our aging of the wood, which is very high. But our student model Genesis clarinet, which I mean blows out some professional clarinets out of the water, in our bass clarinets, because professional bass clarinets are $15,000+.
Easy.
My Tosca that I have right now, if you were to buy it now, you're going to spend minimum $15,500. Well, we have a clarinet, bass clarinet, that plays incredibly well for half that. And guess what? There's nobody else in that market. It's only a matter of time before everyone else comes on board, right? That's what's so great, is that Royal is pushing the others to be better. And I love that. Some people say, well, you don't want them to compete with you. And I say, well, no, actually, I do want them to compete with us, because what that's going to do is actually make everybody better. Then we grow the entire market share. You're only worried about people that play clarinet now. I'm worried about people who aren't playing clarinet now that have the ability to play clarinet in the future. There are millions of people who don't even play an instrument. What if we market it to them rather than the clarinet people who already play and had a specific, you know, image in mind? So it's a completely different way of thinking that I think the industry right now operates, but things are changing as more young people are actually getting into the industry and putting their own vibe into it.
Yeah, and it's a much needed thing too. I know when I was working with, I don't currently have any beginner younger students, but when I was working with those and that brief window of time where I sold to to beginner students, I mean, you'd be amazed how many times. I mean, because you got to think of it too from a parent perspective, right? Of like sometimes you get the people in there who are like, okay, well, what's if we're gonna actually spend the money? What do we need to get the kid for the first instrument so that it's actually going to be worth our time, you know?
Right.
And other parents who were like, well, you're just going to quit in a month anyway, so why would I, you know? But when we see, I know with the clarinet industry, I don't know, Angela, with the flutes or with really other woodwinds. I'm not as knowledgeable on that area, but with the clarinets, I'm going to try not to name names, but I think everybody who's a clarinetist will know there was basically a baseline price, and then one new, quote new, not new, but one manufacturer kind of came out of the woodworks, and their prices were way, way, way higher than you would expect. But as a result, when that manufacturer started actually selling at that price and making it at that price, and it became kind of more and more popular from the top end players, some of the top end players, the other manufacturers were like, oh, so we don't have to stick to this baseline because there's this other one over here that's making, like charging
Mhm.
twice as much. We can start raising our rates. Well, what that does to the student instruments is the same sort of thing. But their
Yeah.
quality is not going. I play one brand, I won't say again names. I play one brand, but I do not have my students play the student model of that same brand. I won't let them do it. Like, nope,
Mhm.
it's garbage because it comes from not the same factory.
Mhm.
Buy this cheaper one, it's better quality. You know?
Yeah.
So we really need more of that stuff where it's not going to kick out the kids who really want to play, but they've got maybe a parent with a bad attitude, or it's just not available to them with their price point, or.
And that's why we get
Yeah.
kids with Walmart instruments.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not even instruments. They are molded to look like instruments. They don't have keys that move, right? I mean,
No.
Yeah.
or they bought it because it's a certain color, but it doesn't actually play.
Right.
Yeah.
I had one clarinet
that-
that came across my desk or my bench that I literally could take the key and just boop whip by hand.
Oh,
I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't work on this. It does nothing. It's gonna bend the second you
Right.
touch it.
Right. And that all comes down to education because, like we mentioned, and I'm glad you didn't mention any names because that's not my MO, right? I don't want to
Right.
take away anything from anyone. But,
Right.
when you think about, for example, China, like if you can go on Amazon and you can buy a $200 green clarinet, guess where that thing has to be made, basically somewhere in Asia, right? And we begin to get these sort of these images of, oh, everything that comes out, where is it made? I get that question all the time. People ask me,
Right.
where is it made? And I could tell them it's just China and leave it there, but then I know immediately what
They're
they're
gonna hesitate.
thinking,
Yeah.
because two things. One, they don't know that other manufacturers, literally all of them, make instruments in China. I'm not saying your $18,000 clarinet came from China. I'm just saying they
Right.
make instruments in China. But the other side is they don't know that what Royal has done, actually, just to overcome that image, is we've actually invested in higher quality materials than some of the other manufacturers. We've invested in things, we've gone above and beyond just so that we can even be in the same playing field, even if the
Right.
build quality is better, the warranty is better, the wood aging is better. You have to do so much more, and I know this from my life a ton. You have to do so much more just to be viewed as even in the same realm. So I wish people would understand that when we talk about like countries, as if just because it's made in one geographical location, it automatically means it's something, right? I believe that an American and a Frenchman and somebody from China and somebody from Australia and somebody from Africa, they all can have the same ability if they're trained properly, right? It has nothing to do with the country that they're in. It has to do with the effort they're putting in, the quality of the work. So I really wish we could stop saying those types of things and making general comments, because unfortunately, yes, most of the clarinets you're going to buy on Amazon, mom or dad, for your kid, is made in China and it's low quality, and your repair tech won't be able to repair it. But it's not a fault necessarily of the country at large or the people at large, because guess what? The iMac that I'm doing this interview on right now came out of Shanghai. Okay, my phone came from China. You know what I mean? So almost everything you use today, in some way, for better or worse, comes from China. But the difference is Apple has control of their factory, right? The difference is, this company or that company built their factory. They just happen to be using cheaper labor, or maybe they're trying to get some better tax laws or trade or whatever. So it's so much more complex than, unfortunately, what the marketing will have us show. But we have to educate parents. You have to educate teachers on that.
Yeah.
Definitely. We have to educate parents on that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's if you're dealing with parents on any level, if you're a band director, if you're a private teacher, if you're in sales, if you're in repair, that is your job. Like, if you haven't figured that out yet, or if you're training to be one of these things, that's your job.
Yeah.
So don't skimp on your knowledge, because that just leads to problems down the road for everybody. That was a tangent.
That's okay
Yeah,
though.
sorry, that's me.
Preaching moment. Sorry.
That's the beauty
You
of this
can't ask me
podcast.
open-ended questions, right? You can't do it.
No, I meant my statement, not yours.
Oh,
Fair enough.
Cool. All right.
well, Brian, I think that's a good place for us to stop. But
I think so.
we really appreciate you coming on and telling us all these things. I mean, my gosh, you've got quite the story, and it's really nice to have a repair person on here and someone who is on that other side of, yeah, I got a music degree, but I'm making my living using that degree as a tool, not the end expectation, and showing us like, no, this is fine. We need more examples of that.
Right. Well, it's
thank
not just
you.
fine. It's a happy place.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And I thank you for having me. And and I'll just say, look, if I wanted to be rich, I certainly wouldn't have gone into music. But I guarantee you, happiness is more about your personal life and your personal circle and your personal climate. We can be very, very happy with living with less than we thought we could. And don't let me also forget that part of the story that we didn't talk about is my wife having a military job, right? And the kind of security that provides for me to be able to do what I do. So I don't want to leave you with thinking that this kid just came from nothing and did everything on his own, because that's not true. I had people along the way, and certainly my wife has sacrificed a lot so that we could both do what we love. So again, thanks for having me. And if there's anything I could say to people, it's that, look, it's more about your happiness and your survival. As long as you're not hurting other people, do what's gonna make you happy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Brian, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or find out more about your company and what you do, and where can people go to find out more about you and what you do, and et cetera?
Sure. So you can, of course, go to my website at CorbinClarinetProducts.com. Just Google that too. Of course, I'm on social media. I'll be honest that I need to get better at it, but I have other people I work with. Find me on Instagram, Corbin Clarinet Products. Same on Facebook. Send me an email on any of those sites, Brian at CorbinClarinetProducts.com. I do get inundated with emails, but I try to respond as quickly as I can, or just give me a call. I talk with clients, but usually social media and my website if you want to find any information. And if you're not a clarinet player and you just have questions about business and things, I do get those quite a bit. It takes me a while to respond to all of them, but people do ask me those questions, and I'm happy to respond when I can.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're listening to when he's saying Corbin, it's Corbin as in Nancy. So if you're looking for Brian, that's where he's at. Well,
That's right.
thank you again for being with us. And if you're listening and you're interested in clarinet or you play clarinet, do check out Brian's products. I play on one of your bass mouthpieces, and I know you've done some work for me before, and I'm a picky pants. Just going to put this out there. Oh yeah, major picky pants. Like, no, I want it this way, I want it that way, and you've handled every single request I've thrown at you very well. So 5-star review.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right.
Outstanding. So guys, thank you all for joining us. And if you don't mind, please go leave us a review, subscribe, and share with a friend. And thank you again, Brian, for being with us. Until next time.